A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Peter approached Jesus and asked him, "Lord, if my sister or brother sins against me, how often must I forgive? As many as 7 times?" Jesus answered, "I say to you, not 7 times, but 77 times. That is why the kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who decided to settle accounts with his servants. When he began the accounting, a debtor was brought before him who owed him a huge amount. Since he had no way of paying it back, his master ordered him to be sold along with his wife, his children, and all his property in payment of the debt. At that, the servant fell down, did him homage, and said, 'Be patient with me. I will pay you back in full.' Moved with compassion, the master of that servant let him go and forgave him the loan. When that servant had left, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him as a much smaller amount. He seized him and started to choke him, demanding, 'Pay back what you owe.' Falling to his knees, his fellow servant begged him, 'Be patient with me, and I will pay you back.' But he refused. Instead, he had the fellow servant put in prison until he paid back the debt. Now, when his fellow servants saw what had happened, they were deeply disturbed and went to their master and reported the whole affair. His master summoned him and said to him, 'You wicked servant, I forgave you your entire debt because you begged me to. Should you not have had pity on your fellow servant as I had pity on you?' Then in anger, his master handed him over to the torturers until he should pay back the whole debt. So will my heavenly Father do to you, unless each of you forgives your sister and brother from your heart." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Instead of a traditional homily, we're going to have a conversation. So I'm going to turn it back over to Candace and Truls.
Candace? Well, let me set this up. You there?
Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see you. Well, those of us in the Racial Justice Committee, one of the things we talked about was story and the power of story and how important it is to hear each other's stories. And we were also inspired by a YouTube series that's going on called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And we thought, we need to share stories. So this whole segment is about sharing story, a little bit about my story as a Black parishioner here at St. Charles. And Kim, you want to add something to that?
No, I don't. I think that you're completely right about that, and I just have to say thank you for allowing me to discuss this with you. But why don't you kick it off, because I'm having trouble pulling up my screen of the questions we're gonna be asked.
Okay, I can read them. So the way this was going to go, the question was asking me, what is my experience being a Black person living in Portland? I lived in Portland for close to 28 years. I grew up in, well, all over, but mainly Southern California. And I have to say, as a Black person in Portland, it's been mostly good. I think Portland, the way I describe Portland to my friends, is that Portland is a lot like everywhere else. We deal with prejudice and racism like you do all over the country. But in Portland, one of the differences I experience is a lot of white people who would lack experience with people of color. Why? Because there's not a lot of people of color here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that that's something that's different. And then the racism is more subtle. The prejudice is more subtle. It isn't blatant like you would see, quote, in the South with people calling people names, racial names
Yeah.
street. But a couple of examples I made note of. One is uh, I got a really ugly pair of swimsuit from some friends of Robin's, and they had they were brand new, had a tag on them, never tried them on. Took them back to the shop that it was allegedly bought at, and I was told by the store proprietor, "Oh no, we can't take that back without a receipt." I go, "Really?" I go, "You haven't even worn them. I don't even want my money back. I just want something I want to wear. I don't want to wear these ugly things." And I said, "Nope." A couple of days later, my white wife, Robin, went and they were exchanged without question. And I was just like, I couldn't believe it. It's like, really? And then when my brother moved here, I have a twin brother, Per. When he moved here, we went apartment hunting, and we were down in the Broadway, Irvington area looking at apartments. And we came across a sign, a yard sign that said a one-bedroom apartment for rent. We knocked on the manager's door and we're told, "Oh, that's already rented."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. um, and I have countless things like that that have happened to me. And sometimes I think, well, was that prejudice or racism, or was that just really somebody just not,
Yeah.
doing it for whatever reason? But it happens so often that it makes me question. I tell Robin often, I'll be standing in a line at a grocery store, and the first couple of people ahead of me the cashier will be talking to him, bantering, saying hello, how are you, that kind of stuff. It'll come to me, and I think I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
And I get dead silence, and I'm like, wow, or kind of a standoffishness. So that's been some of my experience living in Portland, of dealing with that kind of thing. So, and the next question, do you have the questions yet, Candace?
No, I
Okay.
don't. I'm
I'll just keep
sorry. Like, this
going.
is a difficult situation. Like, I can't pull out my Outlook.
It's
But
okay. We can punt. So the next question,
okay.
in what ways does being Black impact your personal life and your professional life?
Yeah.
I would say that in my personal life, I've had to make choices to make sure I have people of color in my life and in the lives of my family.
And when you say persons of color, like, do you include white persons too? Like,
I think because white people are not difficult to find in Portland or in Oregon, what I'm thinking about is people of color, i.e. Latinx, African American, people from other countries. That's what I mean. And that's, for me, that was important to have my family exposed to that, my kids to grow up around that. So when we
yeah.
moved 28 years ago, it was really important to choose a place. In fact, I worked for Clackamas County Parole and Probation, and I was told by my managers when I first started working, I said, well, you don't want to live in North or Northeast Portland. Now, you all know what North and Northeast Portland was like 28 years ago.
Yeah.
It didn't have the gentrification. It didn't have all the nice, Kennedy School was closed. There was no new seasons. It was a closed down thriftway. Alberta was pretty much just bars and whatnot. So, but we chose to live here because we wanted our kids to grow up in a diverse community and experience people of color. So for me, it's a lot of it has, in my personal life, it's about making choices so I'm not the only one, I'll put it that way. And then even choosing St. Charles was a choice in part for diversity. One of the things I was so impressed with St. Charles was the diversity of people that attended and the welcomingness to people that were different. And that was something that I value, and it's a reason that attracted me to St. Charles. So And also, I think in my personal life, some on the negative side, sometimes I've had to deal with people, white friends, who may not acknowledge my experience as a person of color. You know, who tell me you're just being sensitive, or, you know, you don't. What happened to your brother in that apartment? That happens to everybody, not just because you're Black. Kind of denying my experience. One of the things Candace and I talked about, how that denial of experience, it's kind of like a man telling a woman they're not experiencing sexism or things of that nature. As a man, I can't understand what it's like to be a woman and have to deal with sexist behavior. And I think as a person of color, I think it's hurtful for me when people deny my experience or don't acknowledge that what I'm experiencing is real. So personally, that's been challenging, and it's actually closed some doors on some relationships with people who aren't able to empathize.
Oh my God.
What?
Listen, so the new plan is that you have to pick up 17 from John.
Okay.
It's a terminally ill.
What?
Terminally ill.
Okay.
Yeah, so come prepared.
Then professionally, it's been a challenge because often I've been the only person of color at my job. I was the first Black probation officer hired in Clackamas County years ago, or promoted to a probation officer. And so, and as I moved up the ranks and got into executive management, I often found myself as the only person of color at the table. And that was challenging. It was challenging some because some people didn't think I belonged there, felt like I was there because of affirmative action or because I was a racial hire or whatever. And then also having this feeling of trying to have to defend Black people or represent Black people to people. One of the things that people who know me know that I hate being late. And part of that is because my dad made this impression on me. He says, don't be late. White people think Black people are always late, so you don't want to be late. So I found me changing my own behavior because I didn't want white people to think less of Black people because of me. So that's a burden I carried into the workplace. And I felt like I was always watching myself, kind of like a third eye, watching to make sure that I'm doing things, you know, the right way and not doing something that can be criticized. So that has been challenging.
Mm-hmm. So I don't have the questions like at my hand, but how has this developed in the church, like of your spiritual like experience? Because I know that you're really like spiritual, and you and Robin are, and how has this helped you? Like,
well, I think God calls us to be united in Christ, and I believe I really like the gospel reading because I think a lot of what's missing in our world is grace and forgiveness. That God calls us to give grace and forgiveness. I think about the Black church that was I forget the city, but you all know what I'm talking about. Dylan shot up the Black church, and that church had the power and the strength. The people, not everyone, but what was powerful was the grace and forgiveness that was coming from the people who were harmed. And I think that's what God calls me to, is grace. I use this term, we talk about race relations. I say, well, as a Christian, I have to be about grace relations.
yeah.
Even though some of the stories I tell you about people who may have offended me or I felt racism from or prejudice, I still feel God calls me to love them. I feel God calls me to give them grace. Doesn't mean I tolerate their behavior or use it. I'm not saying that. But I do think that's what makes me different. Not me different, but what makes me different as a Christian. And it's why, like I said about St. Charles, for me, St. Charles is a place where we have so much diversity. We have challenges because of it. Of course we do, because we're people. But I do think God calls us to work on that together, to not quit. As I told Candace, I said, it's kind of like living in the United States. You know, it's not perfect. We got our issues, but I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. And I feel like the church is that way. The church has its problems. I don't agree with everything. I'm talking about the bigger church, as you know. But this is where I think God has me to be, and I think to work out these issues.
Well, great. I'll give it back to Leaf now. I think that you've said the majority of what we've discussed. So, but
So, Leaf, did you want me to continue, or do we have much time?
I would love for you to continue.
Okay, I gotta.
okay, cool.
One of the other questions was, do you ever feel different in a group setting because of your race or ethnicity, and how did this affect you? And I said, yes, mainly because of the lack, as I mentioned, when you don't have a lot of people of color, especially in Portland, you feel like you really stand out. Again, I use the analogy of if you're a woman and if you're the only woman in a group of men, you really notice that you're the only one. Sometimes I'll be walking down the street and I'll see another black person, I'll nod or wave, and one of my friends will say, "Oh, do you know that person?" I'll go, "No." I go, "Well, what's that about?" Well, one of the ways I explain that, if you ever go to another country, and I have, where you don't see anybody from the United States for a week or two, and then finally you hear somebody in a coffee shop, overhear them talking, "Oh, that's those people from the United States." First thing you want to do is run up to go, "Hi, I'm from there too." It's just something that we all do, that we want to be connected to people that are like us in those kinds of ways. So that has been my experience. And I talked about work already.
But Charles, like, I want you to like identify it with the fact that you talked to me about being a woman and being different and how that is meaningful, you know? And so.
Yes, and you're right, Candace. It's about understanding that I can't ever completely, I can empathize with how women experience the world, but I can never completely understand it because I'm not traveling through the world that way. And I think that relates to race as well. There's one of the last questions that we had was, have you witnessed someone being treated unfairly because of their race or ethnicity? And
Yeah.
I've seen it a lot. And a couple of situations, just a couple examples I would want to give is, I profoundly remember a black woman. Her name was Sharon. I won't mention her last name. She had 4 small children and she was houseless. I became friends with her at a homeless center that served dinner to people who were houseless. She called me one night. She had my phone number. She called me one night at 2 a.m, saying she'd been evicted. And this black woman and her 4 kids needed somewhere to stay. And I said, okay, hey, she told me where she was in which part of town. I said, hey, she talked about a hotel or motel. And I said, okay, I'll call the hotel. I'll give my credit card. I'll make a reservation so you have a place to stay tonight, and then we'll figure out things tomorrow. Called the hotel, gave him my credit card information, did what I said I'd do. The hotel person said, yeah, fine. Went back to bed thinking, okay, this is done. About an hour and a half later, get a call back from Sharon. They won't take me. What? They wouldn't take her. I called the hotel back, and the guy acted like he didn't know, like we'd never had a conversation. I was so frustrated because I knew this was happening to her because she was a poor black woman. And it was just infuriating. And then more recently, I was with my daughter. We were at a Subway here in the neighborhood, and there was a person of color, a black person who I believe was from an African country, who was trying to make an order at the Subway. And the person helping him, a white person was helping him, was picking on his inability to speak English by kind of picking on how he said things, or you said yes, no, you didn't say, you said no, you didn't want a tomato, but now you're saying you want one. And you could tell it was really just kind of picking at him and agitating him. And I just had to say something. I said, I know what you're doing, dude. Stop it. This is wrong. You cannot do this to this person. And he kind of go, what? And he kind of backed up a little bit. But what warmed my heart was when the person was leaving, he says, yes, you cannot do that to me, and walked out. But I was, it bothered me. It also bothered me. My daughter had to see something like that happen to another person of color. So the last question is, how can St. Charles grow as a parish in recognizing a person's multicultural identity while being respectful of a culture of a culture need to socialize amongst each other?
Yeah, I'm sorry it wasn't the best described question, but
So Candace and I talked about the challenges St. Charles has with diversity. And she asked me my opinion, and my opinion is, I think St. Charles we are really good at being friendly and inviting to people. I think where we struggle is we have old ways of doing things that were done by wonderful people, but those people aren't here anymore. We have a new group of people that are here, new communities of color and people who don't exactly relate to the way we've done things in the past. Again, I'm not saying that things we've done in the past are bad, or that's not the point. The point is, I think we have to look at, it's kind of like putting, as the Bible talks about, putting old wine or new wine into old wineskins. How do we look at ourselves to do things in a way that relate to all people? Now, that sounds simple for me to say. That's a huge lift. But I think that's what's ahead of us as a parish, is to look at how do we do this together. And I know there's places where that's happening, like with the Multicultural Committee, and where people are trying to do that work. But I think as we move forward and we try to bring people into the parish and share leadership, I think we have to look at doing things in ways that people identify with themselves.
yeah, yeah, and I agree. But I'm only one person, so I need everyone's help, and Charles has been amazing for that. So.
And Candace, you've done a wonderful job pulling together some resources on our website. That's one of the things we wanted you guys to pay attention to, is the resources she's gathered. We've helped her, but she's been our leader. So thank you, Candace.
Thank you.